Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltiziak, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast, part of the Minute Media Podcast Network. The Detroit Lions are now in a new, grittier era, and we look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players, gaining more insight on what makes this team go. Welcome to another episode. In episode 254, we discuss Detroit Lions news and we preview the NFL Combine. This includes the newest member of the Lions coaching staff and discussing their biggest coaching hire of this offseason. Plus, we'll talk about what to look for as the NFL Combine gets underway next week. That and more. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
This is Trevor Nowatzki, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
Joining me today is Coach Jerry Angers, former Michigan High School Coach of the Year. He's also named Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He is a scouting and training director for Bull Rush Sports. Coach, good to be talking football with you, even though the football season has ended.
Yeah, glad to be back. It feels like I haven't talked to you guys in about 2 months.
It does feel like it's been a long hiatus, even if it wasn't that long. We're talking football years, right? Like kind of like dog years instead of human years. Well, joining Coach and I is the sports writer of the year for Community Newspaper Holdings Incorporated. That's the senior sports writer for the Traverse City Record Eagle, James Cook. James, good to have you joining us too.
Yeah, good to be here. Yeah, it's like playoff weeks or playoff years is kind of like dog years. You know, when the Lions aren't in the playoffs, it seems like a long time.
Yeah, we got a little spoiled here recently with some success from this team, and maybe, I don't know if spoiled's the right word, but maybe a new foundation's been set, and we'd like to see that continue. And so no postseason play this year was definitely felt by all of us. Well, folks, as we get started, we want to let you know our show is brought to you by our friends at Roaster Jack Coffee Company. They're out of Traverse City, Michigan, and since 1999, they have been brewing premium beans, roasting premium beans from small farms around the world, fresh to order just for you. And the only thing better than good coffee or great coffee is great coffee with a discount. Go to their website, use the code LIONS. Their website's roasterjack.com. Use that code LIONS, gets you 20% off the order. Okay, we've already alluded to it, guys. First weekend without football. It just wrapped up. And so we're getting back together because, as we know, the NFL season never really ends, right? It's the offseason for games, but there's the other things going on. The first order of business is to talk about one of the first games next year, and that's going to be one of the international games. The 49ers are going to be playing the Rams in Melbourne, Australia, and I think it was announced that's going to open the season, James. First time in Australia. Cowboys are going to open in Rio. The Saints are going to play in Paris. Again, we don't have all the details on the schedule. Things will come out here and there. Any thoughts on that initial one or any of the others I mentioned?
I'm just looking forward to seeing how many times we have really bad shrimp on the Barbie jokes and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, maybe people will go down that road. Coach, how about you? I mean, we got a divisional game opening on the road overseas. I know, we had one open in Rio last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's the best time, really, especially if you open the season, because you got all that time going up to that season opener, and you're not doing that longer travel during the season. So, I mean, I think, if I was a coach, if I wasn't a retired coach and I was coaching NFL, I'd be happy with having that first week one. That's what I want to say, because I know I could get everything planned up, and then we'd come back and hit the ground running in our regular season doing our normal travel. So, but hey, we know it's going. It's going to be, what are they talking? Hopefully 18 games someday, and I think we're going to have some, over the pond teams, and it's just the way it's going. It's about the dollar, and hopefully everybody stays healthy.
Well, I think you're right on that travel part, because you're right. Going that far, it does make sense to open the season with it. One thing I picked up on is Cowboys in Rio and the Saints in Paris. Okay. And those matter for a couple reasons. The Lions have marketing rights. Those of you, if you followed this international thing, NFL teams are getting marketing rights in different countries, and some teams share a country. Some are the only ones in a country. The Lions have the marketing rights for Canada, Brazil, and Germany. So, one thought was maybe the Lions could play in Brazil because they have the marketing rights there, but the Cowboys are playing there. Cowboys and Lions do not play each other this year, so that would rule that out. I think everybody is expecting Germany, Detroit Lions. I mean, just Amon-Ra St. Brown. We've known that connection for a while. So that connection, that option is still there. And here's a crazy idea. It's just following, trails or connecting dots. The Lions do play the Saints this year, if I'm not mistaken. And the Saints are in Paris, and the Lions do play a road game against the Saints. And we saw the Vikings play 2 games in a row overseas last year. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but they could have them play in Munich one week and then in Paris the following week before coming back. How would you feel about something like that, James, if that were to take place?
That'd be pretty bizarre. The Jaguars have done it too in recent years, and I think they might be doing it this year too.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's another one there. But it would be interesting if the Lions are playing in Germany during Oktoberfest. Mm,
I I
that's going to
should have
be
known you were going to go right there, James. Yes.
yeah. That's incredibly tempting.
Yeah.
Coach, any thoughts? Again, we know the Lions are going overseas. We presume it's going to be Germany. We presume it'll be a home game against one of those opponents. And then again, I just threw out there's a potential for them to go back to back. If you already have a team over there, it cuts down on travel and stuff like that. That could be a pretty interesting thing. Don't know if the NFL will do that, but we have seen them have teams play back to back before.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's all about the travel time, and it's all about the time away from the facility and those things, and where that's going to help the Lions, in the long run. The Germany one, I'm hoping for because the stadium's going to be full with all Lions fans. It's going to be a
Yeah.
home. It's going to be a home crowd for us, and we play well with home crowd. So, but yeah, and if it was a 2 week thing, then it works out. I can't remember the records on the guys that did the 2 weeks before, but I think it pays dividends when you know that you're going to be gone, for those 2 whole weeks. But the other thing too is the Lions. You remember last year, we played the first game of the year. We played on Thanksgiving. We played on Christmas, and some of the players were, just a little bit upset about it, even though that's part of the game. So hopefully it bodes well so that the players, and again, they know they make a ton of money and they know they're supposed to do this, but it's still when you're away from your family and your kids and stuff like that, it's hard enough when you're playing in the States, let alone be gone for 2 more weeks. So hopefully it balances out and we won't be playing all those crazy games.
Well, we should get those answers here in the coming weeks. If
Mhm.
not, yeah, definitely at that time. So, all right, we got a little roster update stuff. There's going to be things changing, but we got an earlier one than we were expecting. You've probably heard the news. Levi Onwuzurike, Josh Pascal are still on the roster. We thought they were going to be free agents, but because at least into camp, they'll be on the 90-man roster. We'll go from there. But James, kind of explain a little bit about what that rule says.
Yeah, it's a little known NFL loophole in the CBA, and I wasn't really familiar with it either until this came up. But it's called tolling a contract, and it's basically for just this exact kind of situation where you have players who got hurt in the off season or during on preseason, never played a snap, and it's the last year of their contract. So it like those all things got to hit. You got to be on the PUP list or the NFI, not injured reserve.
Yeah.
Um, and if you do all those things, then basically the last year of that contract just gets extended for another year. So they get the same contract for one more year. The team has basically kind of the right of first refusal on that. The team can say, no, we don't want to extend it, but if the team wants to, they can take that year, put another year on it, pretty much identical to what they had, and so that gives them two pretty good, when healthy, defensive linemen at pretty reasonable contracts. So it's kind of like you've added two pieces in free agency already.
Yeah, we're going to get into that when we do that free agency preview to kick off March, but you're exactly right. There's two more pieces back in this puzzle that the Lions don't have to go searching for. Now, what that means and at what level that is, we're going to get into that later, but we want to let everybody know Levi and Josh, they're on the roster right now, and we'll see what that means going forward. Um,
Yeah. And
Dave,
I and I
David,
would
yeah,
I was gonna say, and I would think that that Levi, especially his was a torn ACL. He did it before the season even started. So by the time preseason comes back around, he's going to be over 12 months since he that happened and he had surgery. Uh, so he should be ready to go and having kind of a year off. Hopefully those back issues are behind him as well.
yeah. Yep. And then another topic. I don't keep meaning to bring this up, you guys. I know I'm a big David Montgomery fan already, but it sounds like the soundtrack could be changing a little bit on this. Some people have said, if it's up to Demo if he wants to come back. We've heard Dan Orlovsky comments with Dave Burkett. He just talked about how great Monty is, playing 21 games in a season. Should you make it to the Super Bowl? That's a lot. Having a two-back system with Monty adds life to Gibbs' career. And then we heard an interview from Drew Petzing. James, get us started then, Coach. I want your thoughts. But it sounds like, it sounds like what I want it to sound like. I'll put it that way. What do you got, James?
Yeah, during the interview, I think it was with Pride of Detroit. They had an interview with Drew Petzing for about 20 minutes or so, and pretty good information. And one thing he mentioned, they had specifically asked him about David Montgomery and bringing him back, and he glowed about Montgomery. And then they asked him about the possibility of playing the two of them together, him and Gibbs. And Petzing didn't bat an eye and said, "Yeah, we got to put our best players on the field at the same time." And it's interesting that he said numbers with it, and he said whether that's 5 plays a game or 20 plays a game, um, and use those two numbers. So I would assume that the five would be probably the cap for that. But I think doing it is something that just totally makes sense. At least to just throw a team a curveball,
Yeah.
and say, hey, you got these two running backs who can both do everything. You put them both in the backfield. You can't tell what we're going to do.
Coach, what was your takeaway from Petzing's comments about David Montgomery? He didn't talk too at length about it, but he did drop a couple of those anecdotes.
Yeah, well, I think it's you want to keep as deep as you possibly can with the guys that can play at high level. We have two running backs that can play at high level. The Monty thing, what we read in social media, what he comes back with, what this guy's pushing. Those are all their meetings inside. Even Petzing said that. He said that's those problems. This is what I would do for him. And the other thing too is what team can Monty go to and be the number one running back? And I'm not saying he's not a number one running back, but what team would say bring him in and say you're going to get 65% of the reps, and do you want to do that or do you prolong your career? So I think that's a big thing too, and that's where David, it's going to have to be a perfect. And I'm going to help you on this one, Matt, because I know you'll be happy. It's going to have to be a perfect picture for David Montgomery to leave the Detroit Lions. And I'm going to say it again. It's going to have to be a perfect picture where he knows guaranteed and everything is going to fit right into where he's catching passes, he's running the ball, he's on pass plays and stuff like that. And I think, and again, I'll touch on it a little bit here. Each week you go to a different game plan and situational are different. How do you match up, work in your favor? Are we going to be in 13P because we're talking about 3 tight ends, or are we going to be in 21P with 2 running backs? Those are all situations that fall in. And I brought that up too about Montgomery. I think I brought it up later in the show, but I'll talk about it now. Last year David Montgomery did not get all of his carries because we were chasing score. We
Yeah.
were chasing points. Does that make sense? And
Mhm.
as a football coach, and I'm gonna because we're on David, and as a football coach, David Montgomery's right here, and Gibbs is a little bit higher. You're going to play the little bit higher guy because he is the guy that can break out a 90-yard run in overtime or 86-yard run in overtime, even though Montgomery can do it also. Because if you lose a game and Gibbs isn't on the field, then you second guess yourself, even though Monty is really, really close to Gibbs. And so
Yeah.
I think does that make sense? So I
Mhm.
think they're going to balance it, and with the run game, what they're setting up, they're gonna create the clock management. They're going to create the scene where we're running the ball out. They're going to create it where we have a lead and we can put the ball on our two of the two best running backs duel in the NFL. So I think that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know.
And
I like what you said there, Jerry. Picture perfect is what it's got to be.
Mhm.
James, what do you want to add? Then I'm going to go down the picture perfect aisle.
yeah, because there's only going to be so many scenarios, so many teams that don't have a already pretty well set running back rotation, or at least the top of it. The teams that I can think of off the top of my head where their running backs are free agents and there may be turnover would be like the Cowboys, the Jaguars, and the Texans would be the three right there. And does Montgomery want to go to any of those? He's going to want to go to a good team, I would assume, right? So maybe, and all three of those are pretty solid, but it's going to have to be the right fit for him too.
Yeah, and I do think there's more teams available. I mean, I could see Kansas City being a team. I could see even Denver looking at him. A lot of places would fit for him, and a lot of people would welcome him because they would want his ability there. But like, Coach, I like what you said. It's got to be picture perfect because you know Petzing said, Monty's a 3 down back, so that's not something every running back is in the NFL, and you have two of them on this team, so you know they're not that many limitations, right? They've got the two back set if they want it, or like Petzing said, you get the best player on the field. No one plays all the time, and so if they're in this to go win it, again, the last thing you want to do is create another weakness or another area you need to fill on the team. And so, as long as they can assure David Montgomery that this is going to work better than last year, and so many things came into it, like you said, it was chasing scores. It was not adapting when personnel went different due to injury and stuff. Let's hopefully not talk about this again until we know the final thing. That's my hope, guys. I can't promise it, but we're going to do our best not to.
I was thinking about when he scores 3 touchdowns in the first game, but I guess we can talk about it prior to that.
We can do that, yeah.
For us.
Anything else you guys got Lions wise, social media or roster stuff before we move on to the coaching staff? No? Okay. Let's go to the coaching staff then. Dan Skipper reporting eligible as a coach. Now, I know the Lions had a couple of open positions. I think it was assistant tight end coach and assistant offensive line position. I know this week is when they typically finalize all the positions. James, any insights on this? I'm glad Skipper's back. I'm glad he's still with the team, even if it's not as a player, because I think there's a lot of things he can bring to this. But what do you got on Skipper, the coach?
Yeah, they moved some stuff around. They promoted Steve Oliver to tight ends coach to replace Tyler Roll. And then they kind of bypassed Seth Ryan in doing that because he was already on the staff. And when they hired their new tight ends coach, so then Ryan left. Jets, he went to the Jets as their passing game coordinator, and that pretty much just left that door wide open for Skipper. And he fits right in there. And he also did some coaching work this offseason in one of the All-Star Bowl games. I think it was the East West Shrine Bowl where he was coaching the offensive line there. So I mean, he's getting to know some of those guys that the Lions may be looking at in the draft too from that game.
Yeah, and Coach Skipper's a guy who, well, we've seen over the last 3 years, totally embodies the grit and the attitude about this team. But he's also a guy that we've all seen before our eyes, get cut on Hard Knocks and then develop into a player that the Lions could trust in certain situations. How good is this for the coaching staff? How does this all play in for the Lions hiring him?
I think you look at how deep of a hire he is, and what I'm talking about is you got a guy that played that sixth offensive lineman. He backed up or started at left tackle. He reported eligible. He caught a touchdown pass.
Yeah, he did.
But you have a guy also that was on a practice squad for 6 years and just kept grinding and kept sticking with it. And so his work ethics and stuff like that. You got a guy who called out the offense week 17, week 18 about we need to get better. We're not doing our jobs. You're talking about it's not Sewell, it's not Decker, it's Skipper calling guys out and saying, including myself. So, and the reason I bring up that is because the development for him to help the younger guys and can say to them, you gotta work harder. We got to get some extra work in. This is what I did. This is what I did. You're talking to a guy from experience, even though he never became well, he did become a household name because Skipper's eligible. Everybody knows who he is. Friends of mine all across country, you say Dan Skipper, they know exactly who it is. He never became the Pro Bowler, but he became what the Detroit Lions are all about: hard hat and a lunchbox. And that's the thing with him. And again, he knows the scheme, he knows the concept, he knows the players. They may have him to work with the guys that we're trying to develop. I think it's a great addition, and I think you're keeping everything in the house, keeping the family together. And not having Skip around next year would be a locker room thing as much where people are like, man, I kind of miss Skip. I'm sure he's a big goofball in the locker room. And I'm just, I think it's just a great hire.
Yeah, and another guy that they're not letting leave is Bruce
Yeah.
Gradkowski. Like they blocked an interview request from the Dolphins on that one, James and Coach. I don't know if either of you guys have anything on that, but it means the Lions like what they have in him and they don't want him out the door.
Right. And then you can only essentially block an interview request if they're interviewing him for a lateral move. If
Right.
it's for a promotion, there's nothing you can do about it. So no, they're like, oh, we have our guy in this position and we like him here. So
Yeah.
sorry, Dolphins.
Yeah. That's good.
Offer him a promotion or nothing
Right.
else.
Right. And I think that may be what happened with Seth Ryan too. Because and you got to remember, AG and Dan are really good friends, and they're probably talking, and those are situations that with Seth Ryan, he was probably saying, man, I think I want him as my pass game coordinator over here, and Dan said, okay, then I'm going to promote the, not that I don't know how they can do that, but
Mhm.
you guys follow what I'm saying on that,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
saw after he left Rex Ryan, they were talking to Rex Ryan on Get Up.
Hmm.
And he brought it up right away. He said, yeah, my son's going to the Jets. Man, I still love the Lions. And when he said that, I kind of read into that like the Lions are helping him further his career. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because that's a promotion for him.
yeah,
It's going to the city where his dad coached,
yeah.
the franchise where his dad coached, obviously, and it helped the Lions because it opened a coaching spot for Skipper, who I think that they wanted that. So it all worked out, I think, for both parties.
All right. Well, let's move over to more of the interview of Drew Petzing. Our friends at Pride of Detroit, Eric Schlitt and Jeremy Reisman, had the opportunity to do about a 25 to 30-minute interview with him. And we got a great I'm going to say we got a great first impression as far as we were able to make a first impression of him. I personally think it is a great one as well. But by seeing the video interview, seeing his personality, I want to just start with what he talked about, Coach, with his core philosophy. He said running the ball is an attitude thing, moving guys off the line of scrimmage, putting the ball in the also in the hands of some of your best players. But doesn't that seem like exactly what Dan Campbell's been doing since he got here, albeit things didn't quite work this past year? But every year leading up to that, it was about we want to own the line of scrimmage, and it sounds like that's what Petzing's philosophy is.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys, I mean, I text you guys immediately after I listened to it and said I was totally excited. I was actually listening to it when I was driving back from Marquette. I had to pull over and relax a little bit because I was pretty excited. I'm being honest because, from a coaching standpoint, you listen to things he's saying like that, and he's going to match his personnel in a game situation the way Dan Campbell wants it because I think they're on the same page in that. But I think he's also going to match it by where are we going to be most successful in which situation, whether it's the 13 personnel, whether it's two tight ends, one tight end, extra tackle, two running backs. And you can see that. And he was popping things off. He was just popping things off to let everybody know he knew what he was talking about, which he does. And that was the exciting part. I think one of the things I really got from it, well, there's two things on top. I'll just run right through it. Was he seems like he's a player coach, which you have a better locker room when you listen and your players know that you are hearing what they are saying. And I do not see him being that guy. Yeah, that's a great idea, Jared Goff. We're not running that. I don't hear that because he alluded to the point where he is not on the field with a helmet on. He's on the
Right.
field or in the box with a headset on. And those are the guys that are out there are the ones. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways I got. The other one, when they asked him about 50 points, who he wanted to score against, he said all three of them. Politically correct, great job. But the one that stuck out the most for me when I got the most excited, I think that's when I text you guys when he says, all I care is that we score one more point than our opponent. And again, he's not he's trying to get victories, not social media tweets.
Hey,
So we
speaking
got.
your love language, coach.
Oh God, I was so excited. I watched it twice, you guys, because I couldn't really watch it when I was driving, so I had to
Right.
watch it when I wasn't driving, and especially just I thought everything he dealt was awesome.
Well, and I loved how he talked about in Arizona, he wanted to run some wide zone schemes in his first year and thought it was going to be the thing. But as they got ready to go, he said he just didn't feel like they were doing well enough. So he adapted. And he said, any coach does that. You know, you emphasize what you have, James. And so I like that flexibility that he has shown. You would think every coaching staff would do this, but that doesn't always seem to be the case. And one of those things he did was 3 tight end sets. He talked about needing guys with multiple skill sets in that tight end set because the
Mhm.
idea is you want to create mismatches and that you get more variations. You're starting to see more variations in the NFL. So, what are some of your takeaways from Petsy in there?
Yeah, he does adjust to his personnel. He doesn't necessarily say this is what I run and we're gonna cram X player into Y spot. We're gonna. I think in part the 3 tight end thing was because they didn't have great wide receivers when they were there. They had Marvin Harrison Jr., who was kind of I'm gonna underachieving as a a top 5 pick. And outside of that, they didn't have any other consistent wide receiver threats. Injuries had something to do with that too, but they had a multitude of tight ends, good tight ends on the roster, several of which are free agents this year, coincidentally. So,
Yeah,
uh,
keep your eyes open.
so I mean, he adjusted to that. He adjusted the blocking scheme. Like you said, he wanted to do a zone heavy scheme. He ended up going to more of a gap scheme and using both. Not consistently just using all one or all the other, but going back and forth and stuff. So I think that was good too. I don't think it was in this interview, but in another interview, he mentioned that he's going to be coaching from the sidelines, not from the box.
Mhm.
He's going to be calling plays from the sidelines, which I think is another good thing
Mhm.
for the offensive coordinator to do.
Yeah, he mentioned how he's done both and whatnot, but he just feels like it's easier to have that quick conversation on the sideline
Yeah.
with it. And so I like that. And then coach, he also brought up, you can talk to that. I think everybody preferred Ben Johnson on the sideline versus, Morton up in the booth. But the other thing Patsy commented on, something I think we've been seeing with the Lions is there's more variations of defense to plan for. It's not just base or nickel. And we've seen the Lions get creative with that on the defensive line and with their linebackers. Uh, what does that type of situation create for offenses to plan against?
Well, I think if you're talking with him being on the sidelines as well as in the box, he
Yeah,
even said it when he's in the box. And I was there. I was in the box for the 2 years at Saginaw Valley, and you're up there and you're kind of watching. You're just kind of
right.
like watching the game, and it was good for me because when you're on the sidelines, you're emotionally attached to what is going on. You can look into something from field level and go, man, he's a little bit wider than I thought, or he's a little bit tighter than I thought. Oh, they're press coverage. Oh, but he's bailing right when he gets out of press coverage to go to zone. At corner wise, stuff like that. There's just so many different things you can see. And I think the other big thing with him that is that quick talk on the bench, whether it's your offensive line or your running backs or your tight ends, we just talked about. He wants the players to have a voice in what's going on. And looking at somebody eye to eye, face to face, you can read what the player is saying, if that makes sense. The
Yeah.
players, he's giving you that look like, listen, man, he's not on that phone going, we got to run. No, he's like, and I just think I think that's going to be huge for him. And I think most of the great OCs are on the sidelines. Shanahan. I mean, we can go on McVay. Lafleur, all those guys. And I think that's what I get from that. The visualization, the being in touch, the being able to put a hand on a quarterback's shoulder and saying, "Dude, don't worry about that third interception. Throw the second touchdown right now." I don't know why I brought that up because Goff doesn't throw interceptions, but anyway.
No, you're right though. And it sounds like you're saying nonverbal communication does
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
And so, folks, I want to let you know if you're watching this episode right now, it's brought to you by our friends at Roaster Jack Coffee Company, folks. If you go to roasterjack.com, you use the code Lions, it gets you 20% off your order. So what are you waiting for? Go to roasterjack.com, use the code Lions, get 20% off. All right. There's my nonverbal communication. Hope it worked, folks. Another guy that's going to help, though, with this offensive coordinator is Mike Kafka. I mean, he may be the most important or second most important hire this offseason. Bringing Petzing in at OC was very important, but Kafka's a guy we thought about. And something we didn't realize until this interview, he was actually on the coaching staff in Minnesota when Petzing was I'm mixing this up. He and Petzing were on the staff together. Kafka was a backup quarterback on the practice squad for the Vikings when Petzing was an assistant coach. James, they've known each other a while. That's cool. I mean, that's the other great thing about both of these guys. They have such a variety of experiences.
Yeah, and when they got Kafka, it was interesting too. I'm going to guess that personal connection must have played something into that, because Kafka was an offensive coordinator candidate all over the place. There was some talk right after the Super Bowl that Kafka was going to be a candidate with the Seahawks for their offensive coordinator job because that's one of the last ones that's open. But from what I've heard now, they're interviewing 4 internal candidates, and I don't know if they've actually scheduled anything with any external candidates
Okay.
to replace Kubiak as their offensive coordinator after he left for the Raiders. We saw what Kafka did when he was calling plays for the Giants in that game, kept them in that game against the Lions. And I think that kind of creativity is going to be something that is going to be pretty good to this offense.
Coach, can you talk to that a little bit? You've got your offensive coordinator in Petzing, but now you've hired Kafka as a high ranking position on offense or something like that. Um, how does that work out? Because I was like, well, the offensive coordinator makes all the decisions, which again, I don't know that that's the case, but that they probably call the plays and maybe, have some of the final say on things. But you've been in multiple levels of a coaching staff. How does that come together let's just look at the Lions offense, knowing that Kafka is in there with Petzing. How might that come together?
First of all, I'm going to knock on wood, but I did some research. Fleury sounds like he's going to get the job at Seattle. That Shanahan tree, he's the tight end run game coordinator for the 49ers. So hopefully that gets finalized. So then we don't have to look over our shoulders to see if he's actually going to go to Seattle. The thing with that is when you have you have your run game coordinator, your pass game coordinator, you have your offensive coordinator, you have your offensive line coach. You have all these different positions where people are putting stuff into this mixed pot that let's call it soup right now. They throw all these ingredients in and then they keep tasting until the soup tastes correctly. That's a pretty good analogy, guys. I like that one. I just made that up on the spot, by the way. But anyways, and so the thing with having a guy like him, with all the situations that he's seen, and from a different kind of a different tree, because it's always you always hear about the tree, you always hear about the coaching tree. Oh, this guy coached with this guy, coached with this guy, coached with, that's why the offenses are great. And then you can kind of bring them all together on that. Maybe Kafka's a guy that loves to be in the box. Maybe he wants to be in the box on the headsets with Petzing. Those are, it sounds like the thing with that is it sounds like they have a pretty good relationship. And so you're going to be able to, he's going to be able to tweak things and put information in that other people don't, Petzing might say, we're going to do this. And he might go, look at, dude, I did this when I was Ken, and we can't do it that way. And then, Campbell, of course, is going to make the final decision on that. So I think it'll be, I just see these guys fitting together in that situation, because how would you have taken that job as a high ranking offensive guy when there was an OC in there? So I think you made a good point. There's a connection in that to where they probably, hey, let's try to work together on this. Let's build the right thing. And I think everybody's in the situation too. If they all come together, the Lions go win a Super Bowl, they're getting head jobs somewhere anyways the following year. So I think it's just a great addition for us, and it'll be fun to see how it works out. And I guarantee there's going to be a lot of Eagles being left at the door when they go into a staff meeting.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing when I was looking up into Petzing right after the hire, as I went and stalked some Cardinals message boards, and of course the fans are like, "Oh yeah, Drew Petzing didn't adjust in the second half and stuff like that," and that could just be casual fans who don't, they just think if we didn't do well in the second half that we didn't adjust. It's just to a lot of people, I think that's just I want to make it look like I know football, so I'm going to say we didn't adjust. Well, what didn't we adjust? I don't know. But so it could have just been fan speak or whatever. But if that's somewhat true, Kafka could be the guy who's just watching from up top and is the adjustments guy.
Yeah,
What is the defense doing that we need to adjust to?
good call.
Like you said,
And
James,
and
there's
and and
no
tweak it.
salary cap on coaching. So you got more
Mhm.
eyes on the game. You got more guys that can make the changes. You're right.
I
Yeah, I
like the
mean,
adjustment. I like the adjustment thing on that, James. That's a great call and say that's awesome.
and since they're guys that know each other, I think, Petzing might be more willing to say, "Oh, I think that's a good idea. Let's try that in the second half. This is working or not working or whatever." So I think that could be one possibility in this.
All right. Well, next week, the NFL Combine kicks off, folks. Um, Guys, we've talked about how the measurables are one thing, but we think player interviews might be the most important part of this event. What are you looking for out of this? James, get us started with one thing you're looking for.
Well, the one thing I had written down here is that when you just go by the numbers, you draft Trayvon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson. Um,
That might be the case, and you know what? I've got the numbers on
yeah.
Hutchinson and Walker, and Walker has played in more games than Hutch due to that injury, 63 to
Hmm.
56. Hutch has 5 interceptions to 1 though, and he has 118 tackles to 101 and 43 sacks to 27.5. There's more stats I could go in, but I'm just
Hmm.
yeah, those are the opposite, but you're right. So keep going down that path you were going on.
Yeah, so if they redraft that the Jaguars take Aiden Hutchinson over Trayvon Walker 100 out of 100 times. But they were looking at those measurables and looking at his 40 time, which, I mean, a defensive end never runs 40 yards. If a
Except
defensive end
Hutch, he
if a
did.
defensive end is running 40 yards, it's normally bad.
Except Hutch had
Uh,
that interception that went about 60
yeah,
yards.
aside from
Yeah.
an interception return,
But
maybe.
those
Yeah.
are so rare. It's like, one out of
Right.
every what, 400 plays or something.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you're looking at Brad Holmes is looking at, he does look at measurables. Every GM looks at them, but you
Yeah.
can't overvalue them. I think what Holmes has done too is look at what guys have measurables but are missing one. And
Okay.
he's used that to draft guys late. Guys that he thinks, oh, well, they're bad in this and they're bad in this, so nobody else is going to take them because of that, and I will. And that's how they've hit on Malcolm Rodriguez. That's how they've hit on Amon-Ra St. Brown, and a bunch of guys that they've gotten in the middle rounds of the draft who should have been high picks. And again, guys like maybe Christian Mahogany, Makai Wingo too. Guys who, if you go back now, should have been drafted higher than they were. And Holmes was sitting there the whole time knowing that they were going to slip.
Well, and it's interesting that the timing of all this is, you've got the combine, then free agency, then you have the draft coach. And I know you dig into this very well and you understand some of the metrics in ways that James and I don't from that coaching standpoint. What are you looking for out of this?
Well, let's go back. You talked about the numbers. And the one I pulled out, yeah, the 40, the broad jump, the all the things, the measurables and stuff like that. They're pretty close. Then I go back and I looked at the stats from Hutch against Walker because I knew you guys would bring that one up. Walker had 16 and a half TFLs. I'm sorry, Hutch had 16 and a half TFLs. This is in college, where Walker had 7.5, I think it was. Then Hutch had 14 sacks and Walker had 6 sacks, but he had 36 hurries, quarterback hurries. Okay, 14 and 6. So Hutch is finishing. Then I looked at the 20-yard shuttle. The reason I looked at that is because that is a movement drill where you're running 5 yards one way, then you're coming back 10 yards the other way, touching the line, and then you're coming back and finishing back from where you started from. And Hutch was a 4.15 and Walker was a 4.32. Okay, so that doesn't sound like a lot. It is a lot, and in that drill about how much faster and quicker he is. And then of course you go into your film study. Walker didn't bench at the combine. Why? I don't know. I mean, so I think those are things that Brad Holmes looks at. I believe he looks at that 20 because that is that movement where you're accelerating, you're running crossovers, you're doing a bunch of different football moves. And then of course they go in when they look at the football concept, watching all the film, are they finishing every play? Are they nonstop relentless on every play? Are they taking plays off? Hutch, have you ever seen Hutch take a play off? We've seen him make some mistakes from over pursuing and stuff like that, but you can live with those because anytime you make a mistake, I used to tell my guys, if you make a mistake, make it fast because you're going to screw something else up. And that's what Hutch is all about. And then I look at the pro day. I'm going to go back to Haseen last year. I fell in love with that guy at his pro day. And you guys remember. And then when we took him to 6 rounds, I was ecstatic, even though he's a project. Probably we don't know. He didn't, he was injured. But his attacking each one of those combine drills with and challenging coaches to work them harder is and so that's that taking the measurables and putting them in tape and making them combine together, you can give away something here and there if they have that measurable where the heart is going to exceed anything else that they have. So that's why we got Hutch, and what a great choice.
Yeah, I concur on that one, as does James and probably like almost the entire Detroit Lions fan base.
Yeah.
So, Coach, we got new guys coming in. We got, the Lions staff will be down there. The coaches from all the teams will be there. What are you looking for out of this? Because I know you're going to be tuning in and watching some stuff. What are you hoping to find out or learn?
Well, I mean, I think the big thing is to see if their measurables equate or are equal to what the tape shows from the games. I've been watching the DNs, the guys from Miami, the centers. I think there's a ton of centers. We got some great tackles out there. How well are they going to move Proctor? From Alabama. I want to see how well he can move a 40 and how well he does in his pro agilities and his individual drills and stuff like that. And to see, we're going to need, the biggest thing is everybody says we need somebody opposite Hutch, we need somebody this, whatever. The biggest thing is we got to get that offensive line right. And so are we going to go to a plug and play player? And could it be a center? And we'll see what happens with that. So those are the things I'm going to look at, especially the center position as well as the offensive tackle position.
All right, James, how about you? Anything else that you're looking for to come out of this?
I mean, the interviews are a huge part of this. I think at the combine, it's easier to play yourself off of a team's list than to put yourself onto it if you weren't on it before. The interview process is huge. We know the Lions want guys who live, eat, and breathe football. And that kind of stuff comes across in those interviews by the questions that they ask. So that's a big part. Luckily for the Lions, what this draft is deep in is what they need. So it's good. It fits what the Lions need. I mean, it's deep in tackles, it's deep in centers, and it's deep in edge rushers. So it could be one of those things too, where come draft time, some people may be upset if they don't take a defensive end in the first 2 rounds, but Holmes may say, no, there's enough in this draft that one's going to be there in the fourth. It's just like Amon-Ra St. Brown when Sheila asked him, shouldn't we be taking a wide receiver? No,
Yeah.
I got a guy.
Yeah. Well, guys, during the Super Bowl, the week leading up, there was all kinds of talk because it was, the media roll there, radio row. Everybody's talking, all these interviews, information's coming out. Well, what's going on here at the Combine, this is before free agency starts, right? But this can help impact a team, facilitate trades. I mean, other big things are happening down here. In addition to these college players visiting, you've got representatives from every single team in Indianapolis. So, there's banter going on. We've seen people released recently as today from around the NFL, guys, very household names. And I mean, I said I wouldn't say anything, but some people think that the Lions might be trying to trade a running back. I don't think that's going to happen, though. But speculation is there's going to be chatter around there, and there is chatter every year between teams to facilitate things. And maybe that's part of the reason it's lined up like this, where you have the combine, then free agency, then the draft. And so kind of keep an eye out for a lot of those things as well. Coach, anything else on the combine before we move on to a final couple topics?
No, just can't wait till it starts.
James, how about you?
No, I think it should be interesting to see. And it's also interesting. I saw a list of pretty high level college players who weren't even invited to the combine.
Yeah.
It's a pretty much more impressive list than in previous years, and you're just like, wow, these guys didn't even get invited.
Yeah. Well, speaking of not invited, the NFLPA is no longer invited to release report cards about the team owners. That was decided just this past in the past few days, and so the annual NFLPA report card about team facilities, about all these different things, is no longer a thing that's going to happen. James, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, they put the kibosh on that. Supposedly, the guy who behind it was Woody Johnson, the Jets owner, because the Jets got a failing grade in the majority of the times that these were released. So uh, Johnson is one of those owners that makes you kind of glad you weren't born a Jets fan. He's right there with the Jets owner or the Bengals owner. So in that way, I kind of feel sorry for Aaron Glenn. But it's also of note that the Cardinals, where Drew Petzing came from, also never really looked great in that report. They like for some things like making their players pay for meals at their headquarters at the team practice facility, stuff like that. Players do not like that kind of thing when they're like, you're not even gonna feed me. You're gonna charge me to feed me and stuff like that. So,
Well, speaking of food, one of these owners I read somewhere, I think it might have been on Pro Football Talk, that when one owner got a bad grade about the food, they cut the food the following season to like less because like they responded in like a more critical way, which doesn't
which is
seem smart for business.
which is just bad business. I mean, and the Jets are in the middle of this. The Jets are also reportedly interested in Amik Robertson, because of the connection with Aaron Glenn. But I don't know if maybe he might want to reconsider that, considering this report and the ownership.
Yeah, if I'm Amik Robertson, I'm going to ask for a tour of the training facility locker room because that's one of the cool things that comes out of this, right? The Lions didn't get the best grade in their locker room for the training facility, and it got revamped. And James, you and I toured that thing. It is incredible. The reviews from the players that came out, they were impressed as
Mhm.
well. And so, coach, that's a great tool for the owners to get feedback from the players, but obviously they don't want the public knowing about it. Is what I think the big thing comes down to.
Yeah, you don't want to go into negative, especially if you get drafted. It's different. But they have their 30, they bring the 30 visits in to, for the interviews and stuff. They can look at what those are. And, I mean, with social media and text messages and knowing somebody who played with somebody on another team, they're texting each other anyways. I mean, Moneyball, they charged you for things during Moneyball too. The players were upset, but it paid off for them. But anyways, so I think it's a big thing. I think the revamping and saying why is this place this much better because their food is better. Well, does that mean anything? And then you evaluate the teams at the top that are always vying for a Super Bowl and do they have the best facilities? So yeah, it's whatever. I mean, it's kind of one of those things I never really read it other than complaining about food or the weight room or what the locker room looks like.
All right. Well, we're just about here to the end of the show. Let's get some time for some final thoughts. James, we'll start with you. What do you got?
Well, we had the thing with Alex Anzalone on social media, kind of venting a little bit. The Lions posted a thing on Valentine's Day, which was their breakup highlight video, which was their best pass breakups from the last season, and saying sometimes a breakup isn't a bad thing or whatever. And he kind of took offense that none of his plays were on there. Um, which is, I think, people reading a little bit too much into it, but also interesting that he noticed that enough and it hit a nerve somewhere enough that he posted about it more than once on Twitter. Uh, So, and the other thing, one other little thing the NFL trade is looking into. I don't think they've approved it yet, but one of the things they're looking into is the allowing teams to trade draft picks up to 5 years in advance. I think right now the limit is 3.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I think the NBA can do like 7 or 10 or something. It's ridiculous. But you're not allowed to trade your first round pick in consecutive years in the NBA. So, but they're looking to do that. So I don't know if that'll change things much, if that'll facilitate trades more. I wouldn't think so because basically the general uh, consensus is that a third round pick next year is worth a round worse. That's why you trade a fourth round pick this year or next year for a fifth this year
Right.
kind of
Yeah, you
thing.
go the opposite. You got to
Yeah,
trade up for the value because you're getting that thing now. That'll be
immediately.
interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder how that came about, wanting to go from the 3 year to the 5 year. Like what idea is there? Is it just
hmm
more flexibility of being able to borrow from the future if there's something you see you're trying to do right now? So yeah. And we talked about, Coach brought up the fact that at some point we might be looking at 18 games in a season for regular season. And so a couple of things to keep your eye on as we go forward this offseason. We'll have the combine, we'll have the owners meeting. Coach, how about you? Anything else you've got you want to bring up?
I just two things on the Anzalone thing. One, he said, I think you guys misinterpret my social media stuff sometime, which is funny because, and we know that one word here or there, like
hmm
saying always, it doesn't always happen. But I think the other thing is the reason they did that is because they were sending a message to Anzalone that please, we don't want to break up. We want you back next year.
Yeah. All right. Well, folks, it is a little bit slower time for NFL news because now we are after the Super Bowl, but there are those pockets of spiking of activity. The NFL Combine is one of those. So we are expecting, hopefully, if everything goes right, to have 2 episodes for you guys to listen to next week. And if it goes as well as planned, we will be hearing from some former Detroit Lions players in those episodes as well. So please make sure you be on the lookout for those. A thank you to Roaster Jack Coffee Company. They've been roasting incredible beans since 1999. Visit roasterjack.com. Use the code LIONS. Get 20% off your order. We want to thank you, the listeners, for tuning in. Please tell your friends and family about the show. Find us on Twitter. Find us on Instagram. Follow the show. Always building up those social media platforms. And you can find us anywhere streaming. YouTube for the video version. Love to hear your thoughts and reviews. You can check out more content and episodes at notthesameoldlions.com. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.